Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. I am Nathan.
I'm Anna.
And we are here today to have a conversation about how we can raise kids who love God and use tech. So a couple quick notes as we begin here. Flint and Iron is the nonprofit Anna and I started a couple years ago, and Gospel Tech is a ministry of that nonprofit where we help families love God, use tech. We want to equip families with the information and the tools they need to have the confidence they need to be able to raise kids in this tech world. So as part of that, we've got this podcast going on right now. Today, we're going to be talking about pursuing our children. I think it will make more sense as we get into it. But really, how can we be intentional and get beyond like, well, they're safe and happy, so that must be fine. But how do we actually get into a spot where we are being intentional with the way we raise them? So quick thanks to all of our listeners, the people who have rated this podcast, people who have left reviews. That's on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for that. That's a huge help to us. Again, we are hearing back from people beyond just our state or even this side of the country who are saying that they're finding out about us and they are encouraged by us and that they're having these conversations thanks to you guys, because it just us behind microphones doesn't actually do anything. That's you helping us reach others with this ministry. So thanks for the blessing you guys are being to us in that. If you want more info, flintandiron.org. If you have any questions or want to further the conversation or want to ask us to dive into like a specific facet of something you're going through, you can reach out, direct message through at Flint and Iron, through Instagram, or at Sparking Purpose, at Sparking Purpose on Facebook, or you can email me at nathan@flintandiron.org or Anna at flintandiron.org. So with no further ado, let's get this started. Welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast, a resource for parents who are feeling outpaced and overwhelmed as they raise children in a tech world. As an educator, parent, and tech user, I want to equip parents with the tools, resources, and confidence they need to raise kids who love God and use tech. You want to kick us off for today?
Yes, well, we're going to talk today about intentionally pursuing our children and what that is going to look like in this world that we are often competing with tech for their time and our own time too. I think it's kind of both of we can easily get distracted and default to tech, and so can our kids. And so what does that look like to pursue them in this environment?
Okay.
That's where we're going.
Good. And so I guess like that idea of like why do we need to have this conversation? Like why worry about pursuing our kids?
Well, I think that I know in my own head and heart sometimes if they are just not bothering me, then things are going fine.
Okay. Okay.
And that's where this was coming from. I feel like this week was just this idea of like it had been a few days where our oldest is and I know we're going to maybe get into this a little bit later, but our oldest is a pretty happy, independent player. And he always has been. And just as he's gotten older, the things that he's interested in are not always things that I'm interested in. And so I know for me, it can be everyone's quiet and happy and occupied, so then we're good. But it also can be, we just went a few days without like any intentional conversation or like a real meaningful connection. And not that you have to have like this big like breakthrough moment every day, but it just was me feeling like, I'm not making time. Like these other things that are on my list are fine and good, and even things that I need to do in my life, but not always the most important things. Like my children are only little and moldable and here for me to pour into for a very short season. And that is the most important job that the Lord's given me.
Yeah. And so I guess let's jump into that. That is very clear then. So this isn't even about necessarily tech specifically as far as like, well, we have like facets on how to or how not to use tech, but really we're looking at the intent of what we're doing. And that idea, especially in quarantine when we have a totally different rhythm now, right? You're looking at week 10 or whatever.
Week 1 million.
Week 1 million of quarantine. And so we are dealing with a new normal. And a lot of us can look at some of the ways we've been handling the stress and the fragility of our schedule and of our own sanity. And we have kind of built up some things where we go, man, I don't like where this projects to because, well, let's walk through it. So we talked about Owen. So let's just start with him. So Owen, in this quarantine time, what does that look like when you go, man, am I pursuing him? I guess kind of like run through our kids and then we'll start from there as a spot as we go why we need to pursue them.
Yeah, well, our kids are still little, so I feel like it's probably different with each age group. But I feel like in some of the reading I've done, and I know talking with parents who have older kids, like your teenagers aren't going to come up to you mostly. I mean, some will, but a lot of them aren't going to come and say like, Mom, I really need to have this time with you, or Dad, I really miss having a hug. They're not going to, probably most are not going to do that, but that doesn't mean they don't need that still. And I think I know for just my own personality, like, oh, if you're not asking for something, then that must mean that you don't need anything, which isn't true. Like, that's not true for my kids. And I think sometimes it can be easier to just think like they'll ask when they need it instead of like, no, it's my job as a parent to pursue each child that the Lord has given me and to really look for how I can connect with each one. And I'm not going to be perfect. I was listening to, this is going off script here, but I really liked, I heard Gary Chapman on the Jenny Allen podcast a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the 5 love languages with your children and how to, differentiate. And
what are the 5? Can you read? I know this is pop quiz. It's
words of affirmation, acts of service, quality time, physical touch, and gifts. Okay. So they're having a conversation about what does that look like with our children. And I just loved what Jenny Allen clarified of, okay, we're not going to be perfect in our love. Like, I'm not going to be able to fill their cup perfectly, right? Like, okay, so if this kid's gift is gifts and quality time, like that maybe isn't how I show love, and I can work to do that, but there are going to be holes, and that God's grace covers that. And that even in my lack of ability to fill them up perfectly, that is where the Lord can press in and meet them. And like, that's an opportunity for them to turn to the Lord and say like, my parents were a disappointment in this area. Like,
sure,
those things really do drive us to Jesus. So I feel like that was a good, like, yes, I need to pour into them. And also I'm not going to be perfect at it. And that there's grace for all of that.
Yeah. And I think starting this conversation with that. So when we talk about pursuing our kids, we are not saying if you do this right, your kids will always love God or will be perfect. In fact, I'm not even telling you that they're not going to become an idol to you if you pursue them wrongly. We're saying that pursuing our kids is what we're called to do as parents, that technology is often a way we pacify ourselves and even allow our kids to be pacified instead of being intentional in this relationship. And that the number one way for our kids to meet God in the love of Jesus is in relationship. Right? We can tell them as much as we want. We can give them the best apps, the coolest Bibles, the greatest audiobooks of all time, and they can learn a ton about God, but that doesn't mean they know him. And that's not going to stand the test of hard times. What will is a testimony, and we've talked about that in past podcasts, where the testimony is God's story in you. So your kids may not like God, but they love you, and they're going to love what they see through you, and that is the witness we're giving to our kids. So when we talk about our kiddos, right, we have Owen, who's super driven, determined boy, who is more than happy to. I mean, what does Owen want to do with you? If you had an opportunity that he may not ask you, because he's not probably going to ask you.
No, he's very into Papa and Daddy right now, which is great. I mean, he's 6 and a half.
Awesome season. Good chance for Dad to be a hero for a few years.
And the Papas are heroes, and that's wonderful. He is a goal-oriented child, and he starts every day with a list of this is what we're going to do today.
That he wrote himself, by the way. We're not making this for him.
And we may or may not do everything on his list, but the kid's got a plan, and he spends his day trying to get us all to accomplish his plan, which is another great just parenting opportunity about expectations.
Anyone who knows me knows that that's not my genetics that came from. Just heads up. That's not my fault. He's amazing.
It's great. It's incredible. Great. So that might be like him roping Henry into all sorts of things during the day, or it might be like, when can I go to this grandpa's house and we've been seeing the grandpas and grandmas in quarantine.
Our inner circle.
So when can we go there? When can we go there? When can we go there? Because he wants to do X, Y, and Z with them. So a lot of the things that Owen likes to do are not things that I naturally would want to do on my own,
Sure.
like shoot air guns or play very intense board games or
any
mostly anything that he really is into.
Yeah.
There's a few, like, I'm happy to go play catch. Like, but I feel like he's kind of where, you know, how kids like go through different phases of what they're into. So anyway, with him, if I don't intentionally like set aside my own comfort and my own, what I want to do during the day, then we don't hang out. Like, because he might not even ask me to play the board game because he's happy to play with Henry and he's happy to play with Nathan. And it's not like he doesn't like me. He likes me.
He really does. I can attest.
Just there's not like, I have to be intentional to say like, hey, do you want to do this with me? Or if he does ask me to play the game, like, okay, like that's really not a game I like to play, but I can play with you for 20 minutes. Like, and to set aside my own comfort and my own to-do list so that we get some quality time. Yeah.
Well, and then we have Henry, who's middle kiddo to the extreme, where like he will
We're just saving for therapy for everybody because
poor little Henny though. Like he is perfectly happy doing it, but we can watch from the outside. Like Henry will go days without getting to make a choice. If we do not intentionally set aside and pursue Henry and say, Henny, what do you want to do? Or ask him how he's doing. Like he will just follow Owen around and be a happy little brother and get beat up like 6 times an hour.
Right, because he's not driving the agenda like the oldest kid, and he's not screaming at us like the baby.
Oh man, Hadley.
So he just, classic middle child. Like you just are happy to be here. Yeah. And if somebody looks at you today, then that's a gold star.
Right, yeah. You have a face. I love you. And so that brings us then to this idea of, all right, well, we're pursuing now. In that conversation, we didn't even hear a lot of tech, right? We're just talking about how do we intentionally pursue our kids and not just let them be fine. Like, you're not making noise. You're not bothering me right now. Mm-hmm. Therefore, I'm just going to let you run around. Caveat, that doesn't mean there isn't a space for you to just have quiet and your own thoughts.
Right.
So we're not saying that. We're not even saying there's not an intentional time for tech. We are saying, how do we pursue our kids? And you actually have a story from teaching that kind of your mentor teacher.
Oh yeah, I feel like I was reminded of that last week. I student taught a million years ago, and with a really wonderful mentor teacher. And I remember my first period class. If you haven't been around high school students at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're not typically real chatty.
Right.
They're not happy to be there, but they're very quiet. And I remember thinking as a 20-year-old student teacher, like, this is wonderful because they're so quiet and I can pass out the assignment and they'll just sit there and be quiet.
Yeah.
And in my head, that was great. I'm doing a great job. And then the next class would come in and they were really loud and really chatty and felt like a lot more work to manage for me because I had to really like keep everybody's attention and control the conversation and what was happening in class. And I remember my mentor teacher, Rob, saying, like, how do you think these classes are going? Who's the most engaged? I'm like, well, I really just like first period is so great and easy. And he was like, don't mistake quiet for engagement. Like they're quiet. They're not doing the work that you're giving them and they're not engaged and they're not learning. Your third period class, like that was the next period that came in. And he was like, they are loud and more work for you, but they're learning. Like they're talking and engaged. That is a sign of engagement. And I just was like, oh, that just hadn't.
But they're so much louder.
There's so much more work. Like that is a lot more work. And I think sometimes that can feel like that with our kids. Like, well, if people are just being quiet, and I think that's where tech gets a little bit sneaky and tricky, is like, well, everybody's occupied and everybody is on their own device or watching a show, or if you have older kids who are on their own devices or whatever, like, great, everybody's occupied. Like, it's so much easier. Like, and that, and again, like there's a time for people to be occupied and like, we're going to have our 20 minutes where we're all doing whatever. But I think when that becomes the default, and that's my goal now, is just for people to be, my goal is for everyone to be quiet and occupied so that they're not bothering me. That's where we can get into a place where we're missing out on some of those moments for connection and
And
authentic conversation.
Let's take that minute to address educators who are listening to this. This is huge for us, right? How many times do we think my goal today is to get my kids to behave, right? And that's not the goal. Like the goal is to get our kids to learn. And so we often
for parents too. Like I just want them to be quiet.
For educators, right? We see that in the classroom, and then now parents, let's extrapolate that into our own microcosm of our little family of like, man, sometimes I just want my kids to be clean and nice and not embarrass me in public, right? And what we have is this difference between, we are not saying don't let your kids use tech. We're saying when you use tech, let it be part of that family agreed on selected time. So, hey, we're going to have 45 minutes between this time and that time when you can use your social media, watch your show, play a game, do whatever. You can choose to do it as a group or independently, like whatever your family's agreed on. That's awesome. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you set your time limit, 45 minutes went by and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed. Like I'm going to do another 45 and I'm actually just going to let them walk out and I'm going to go take a nap. And then we're going to make this now a daily thing where our kids actually will pick up on it. And they know if I behave in A and B way, I'll stress out mom and dad so much that I'll get C result, right? We want to avoid those kinds of things. And we do that by pursuing them intentionally, not just by hiding the tech, but by pursuing their hearts and their minds and being parents. So the reason for that is those same drool tech companies we're discussing are doing a really good job pursuing our kids and their hearts and minds. They're trillion-dollar companies. They know that our kids are the next way in. This is why Facebook just made Messenger Kids. It's not because any 6-year-olds are asking for Messenger. That's not what they're asking for. They might be asking for the internet. But Facebook goes, man, if we can get them now, then we're going to keep them as they grow up and we're going to have this pipeline. So let's, as parents, pursue our children and their hearts so that we can be voices that speak into their purpose and to their potential. We can steward their love and their hearts and their lives and disciple them to meet Jesus. So with that in mind, we are then called to disciple. That's kind of our first thought on this and how we steward it. Coming out of Deuteronomy 6:4-9. And I think you have that verse.
Yes, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates."
Yeah, and I love that because it sounds like a lot of to-dos, right? If you just think like, oh, right, well, I gotta do it at this time, and then at that time, like these are really specific. And actually, it's the specificity that kind of almost releases us. It's just do it all the time, right? That you are doing this all the time. That when Proverbs 22:6 says, raise your children up in the way they should go, so that when they're grown, they will not stray from it. It's not saying have enough rules so your kid knows what's right and wrong. It's saying, hey, your kid is learning all the time from you. All it takes is time. And for some of us, we're recognizing, man, when I look around at my COVID quarantine new normal, I go, man, I actually am abdicating a ton of time and attention away because I just want to make it through. I just want to get to bedtime and wake up tomorrow and make it through that day too. And so this is a challenge to us, Anna and I, and extended to you from the challenge we're experiencing in our own lives of, man, we're called to more than that. Right? We're called to when we rise up and when we go out and when we talk and when we lie down and when we do anything, like we are modeling for our kids. What does it look like to trust God and to love others? And they're going to see that by the way we treat them. So that's every car ride, every meal time, every toy pickup session, right? Like whatever we're doing, playing a game with them, doing an activity they want to do, or inviting them to do one with us. We are not simply giving them great Braveheart motivational parenting speeches. We are actually investing in them and showing them through our actions and through our attitudes what it means to be loved and what the gospel looks like in action. So we are forgiving them. We are being humble and recognizing we need forgiveness, and we are acting out our faith. So I think.
Oh, I just think that for me, the Deuteronomy verse is freeing because I feel very overwhelmed at I have to have a perfect family devotional every day if my kids are going to love Jesus. And not that we don't pepper those in, but I feel like, okay, I can talk about God this weekend we had an amazing lightning storm. Like, great. Like, let's talk about God's power and how almighty and majestic he is, like just in this little moment. And it doesn't have to be, some people's children are better. We are not great at making our just in general.
Some people's children are better.
Maybe it's our parenting.
We have like the B- class children.
My standards just aren't high on everything. I have high standards on some things. But anyway, I
don't know where this is going.
Okay. I'm not great at like, let's sit down in a circle and read from the storybook Bible, or we're going to like have this magical like moment. I feel like we try, and not that like we tried to create those magical moments of like, we're going to read from this and we're going to sing a song as a family and like have this time. And sometimes it goes really great. Most of the time our boys are wrestling and like one of us is mad that you ruined the magical moment. Yeah. So to know that.
Don't you realize how special this is?
Yeah. We're having a great time with Jesus.
Super hard.
But I feel like that verse in Deuteronomy releases that burden of, not that we don't need to do that and to teach them how to like read their Bible and to have family worship. I'm not saying that, but to say like, it's so much more than that. That's just like these conversations don't have to be this big staged, orchestrated.
Well, and it's what it comes from, right? Like we don't. Yes. So let me ask you, when you were raised, like, how did you know like who God was? Like what did that relationship look like you? When you look at your testimony and your family, like how did you come to knowledge of Jesus and a love for Jesus?
Everyone around me just modeled that. Like I saw my parents read their Bible. I am sure they read their Bibles with us before bed. And I remember my dad teaching us the Lord's Prayer and memorizing scripture. And then we went to a church that was very Bible based with great Sunday school teachers, where you saw, like, I really believed that the people who were teaching those classes to me in Sunday school knew Jesus. Like it wasn't, I didn't doubt it for a second because of the people I was looking at, like in my coaches, like there was a very authentic, like,
you had some cool mentors.
All growing up, I feel like you could see like, no, I know this person and I love that this person is pouring into me and this person's following Jesus. Like, and they're showing me that just with how they're like, living their life. And with my parents, I got to see them reading their own Bible and praying over us and for us. And
your parents, like I very much when we started dating was recognized very quickly, like, oh, like they love Jesus. Like it impacts the way they make their decisions and how they pray for people and like the way they talk about others. And, and I think that is what we're talking about, right? Like this idea of you are released from, oh man, did I do enough Bible-y stuff today? Did I have the right curriculum? Some of us feel like we need to be theologians to be able to tell our kids about the greatness of God. And like, that's what a sunrise is for. Like the theology side is important, and that is going to buttress and support and expand their ability to marvel and be amazed at God. So we do want that stuff, but we get to kind of teach as we go on that. What we need to do right now is just set the time and space and say, hey, the Bible tells me to do it. I'm going to faithfully begin where I'm at. Right? We're going to Frozen 2 this thing. We're going to do the next right thing. And I think that's really what we're talking about with this tech is how can we do the next right thing with our kids in pursuing them starting today, right? When we look forward towards dinner tonight, what is one thing I can do to intentionally engage my children or my child at their heart level because God loves them? And so let's actually talk about that. Like, what does this look like? I think first we need to address this question of like, is Drool Tech our default? So I'll take a quick aside here. Oh, excuse me. Drool. that was a breath that went down the wrong pipe. That's odd. Is Drool Tech our default? So there's two types of tech you'll hear us talk about. You'll hear us talk about tool tech, and you'll hear us talk about Drool Tech. So tool tech is basically anything that helps us build or create. And Drool Tech is anything that helps us consume or be entertained. And that's kind of the way we look at that. So tool tech is, again, anything creation focused. So that might be a laptop or a nail gun, or it doesn't matter if it has a screen or plugs in. It can be an iPad that you're painting on, but you are creating. You are the designer and driving force behind it. Whereas Drool Tech, it would be something we're passive in, right? We're not participating. We're not growing. We're not applying the information. We're just kind of, struggling over here. We're just having fun with it. So we're talking Drool Tech specifically. And there were 3 questions we came up with to kind of self-check this.
Yes, just some things to think about, just because I think tech can become the easiest default and the easiest thing, or maybe the most likely culprit to distract us or get in the way of intentional time with our children if we're not careful. So a couple questions. The first is, has screen time become the default for an easy engagement opportunity? Is that just the first choice? I think is what that question is getting behind. The second one is, when things are hard or you find your patience growing thin as a parent, is that when screen time turns on, either for you or for your kids? Because I know, I think that can go either way of like, I'm feeling out of control or things are escalating and my escape is to look at the phone, right? Like, I feel like in mom, I don't know about dads, but I feel like a lot of moms I talk to, like, that is a struggle of like, I just want 5 minutes to scroll Instagram and I don't want to deal with what's happening in front of me.
Right. Which, again, there's a time and a place for that, right?
I think that's it. I think you have to, there is a time and a place to scroll Instagram. I don't think there's a time and I think if that is what I'm turning to every time my emotions are getting out of control, then we have an issue. And that needs to be something we need to look at.
So like, why do I feel that itch to go do this escape activity?
Right.
When, like, is it because my kid's being stressful? And if so, I need to actually like intentionally push through that. Yeah, push through that. Okay.
Yes. And same for the kids. Like if that is like, okay, everybody's out of control and rowdy, I'm just going to turn on a show to not deal with. Yeah, to make the problem go away. And then the third, this kind of ties into that same question too, but how do your children handle their emotions? I think this is, especially looking at our older kids, is that what they're reaching for when they're angry, sad, or frustrated? Is that they're like, I guess that would just be like, this emotion is big and now I'm reaching for Netflix or...
Can I share a little anecdote on that?
Yeah.
We had an event at the junior high I taught at. Big event. There's 100 kids out on this big field. They're all playing this giant game of effectively tag. In full disclosure, it's basically LARPing. If you're not familiar with what that is, they all had foam swords, shields, and they're basically doing medieval combat. So it's this big Young Life event. And I literally witnessed, so I was walking around with Owen and Henry, just kind of, razzing people and watching the battle unfold. And I watched a kid get out. He got hit. He threw his sword on the ground, sat down, and immediately pulled out his phone and started playing Fortnite. Like, this happened in a 7-second span of time. And I was right behind him when it happened. And I went over to him and was like, "What are you doing?" And he looked at me and was like, "Oh, I was just waiting." And I was like, man, like, I watched his brain go, I'm angry I got out. I don't know what to do with this emotion. Curl up in a ball on the ground, take out my phone, and just kind of self-medicate Fortnite because I can't handle being out in tag for more than 30 seconds. And that's what we're talking about here, right? This idea of how do they handle their emotions? Not just do they like technology or watching YouTube, watching their shows, playing a game, but like, is this something that is becoming a regular piece of escapism and self-medication that we need to pursue them in relationship, because Jesus calls them to more than simply running from problems and feelings and issues. We want to teach them how to deal with that, how to recognize it, how to verbalize it. Love that, Mr. Rogers. Like, if it can be spoken, it can be dealt with.
It's manageable. Anything mentionable is manageable.
Oh, there it is. Great job.
Yes, I feel like maybe this is we can get into this more in a different episode, but there is a very real anxiety epidemic in our youth that's very correlated to their phone usage of this generation. That's iGen. Is that the generation behind millennials?
I've heard it called that. I don't know if that's official.
I
don't know who decides
that they don't know anything different than having a life with phones. And that there's just across college campuses. I'm sure if you have a teen in your life, you've seen that of just, there's a very real anxiety correlated with that when that becomes our only coping mechanism.
Yeah. So we have those three. So 3 ways to know is drool tech our default? Has screen time become a default for easy engagement? When things get hard, do I push screen time? And when things get hard for my kids, when they try to handle their emotions, do they run to their favorite drool tech of choice in order to kind of try to feel better? And if they do, then we have some reworking, right? We can't just remove. We talk a lot about removing and replacing, that we're taking away the distractions and the things that deter their potential in Christ, and we replace it with things that accentuate that. Our kids are uniquely gifted, and we'll talk more about that in the future a lot, but we emphasize and we encourage those things. So we engage them in silly ways. Like we ask them can they help us carry this, or can they help us prepare this, or do they want to go on this opportunity with us to go run something, right? Anything to get that car time, focus time experience together. It doesn't have to be a 5-day vacation with the family. It can be 25 minutes to the hardware store or something.
Yeah. And it's more work for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that is where we earn some of those opportunities and potential. Not even every time is going to be a great conversation or meaningful connection, but it's just the potential to even have that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first was just addressing
kind of
is drool tick our default?
Yep.
And then the second big question we need to consider is what's our idol? We probably have more than one idol who's taken root in our heart, but
yeah, a couple.
We could,
I'm sure. And
in relation
to to our kids, I think we're trying to focus this conversation specifically on our children and where we are putting kind of tech in priority. Mm-hmm. So you shared, I guess for myself, my idol would be probably my kids like acting well, right? Like that's really important to me. Like I need you to I don't know if
behave
well, and like if you know me, that might surprise you. Like, wow, Nathan's like not really huge.
And the people that know you from childhood always look at me like, wow, good luck with your kids.
Yeah, my children are the older two, at least the boys are currently a product of the mother's curse, the just wait until you have children thing. So they are very much kind of cookie cutter, crazy out there. But a huge thing for me, I guess, would be what I would talk about, the heart, like the attitude and the why, right? Like, so they're going to be high energy. I do not necessarily care about them wrestling each other and someone getting a bloody nose. Like that stuff doesn't bother me. It's the attitude, like, why are you doing that? And that was mean. Like you saw an opportunity to hurt your brother and you took it.
What's the idol though in your
And so
heart? Mine
would be, man, like that makes me mad that you just had that happen. Like I have this indignation and it's not always righteous. So it's that somehow was a reflection on me as a parent that you had a bad heart.
You're acting so
like
badly.
Yeah, your pride. So I'm just trying to say it's not their energy level that affects my pride. It's their attitude that affects my pride. There is, of course, parts of their attitude. I do need to prayerfully do it, but you can do the right thing for the wrong reasons. So with that in mind, that would be mine. Yourself?
Oh, I think that COVID's really...
COVID's your idol?
COVID has really revealed...
Oh.
A lot of shiny things have popped out.
Yeah.
But I think my own comfort and just like, I wanted things to just be comfortable and convenient, and I don't want anybody getting in the way of that. So children are really good at making sure that doesn't ever happen. Yeah.
Revealing idols in your heart.
Yeah. And I think my goal, like we said earlier, often is just like, well, everyone's behaving and they're not bothering me. Right. So then that must be good enough. And I loved, your sister the other day said, like, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad. Like, sure. Hard doesn't mean bad. Yeah. And I think a lot of times I can equate that in my head of like, oh, they were so much work today, or like so many attitude problems and so much correcting. Like, that's not a bad thing. It just, like, it's that third period class. Like, that they're learning and we're getting to work through something together. But I think it's that shifting in perspective of when I can remember, no, my number one job is to be a disciple maker and to steward the lives of these children. Then I'm not bothered by all these parenting opportunities that pop up. But when my goal in the day is my own comfort and my own convenience, then my children peeing in the neighbor's front yard is all of a sudden a real inconvenience.
That really happened.
I mean, it is a real inconvenience.
We literally got a text and we're like, hey, we think we got a visitor. Neighbors sent us a video from their nest, and it literally is our boy running into their front yard, like their front path in their driveway, just dropping trow and peeing on a bush.
You might have to edit that out, but we probably don't need to tell everybody about that.
We didn't say which one. You can
could have been any of them.
Could have been any of them. It was me.
Okay, but...
And so I think, it's that idea of the idol of comfort, my idol of pride and feeling like I'm in control, I guess is where that would probably stem from. Yes. So this idea then is calling, what do we do with that? So if with our with the drool tech, we were able to intentionally set that aside and pursue their gifts, not just distraction. Then with our idols, right, we can go in and lay those down and pursue their hearts, right? So instead of saying, hey, my kid now defines me, I go, no, man, like Jesus defines me. I am a child of God. God loves me. God loves you. I'm pursuing you because I love you, not because I want to fix you, not because I want to make you go away, or I want control of you or this day. Like, I'm going to pursue things that help me share life with you and help me teach you what God looks like as we go along the way, which can look like what?
Hugging them, I think. And even as they get older, they resist. Like our biggest kid squirms away from me every time I hug him. But every time he walks by, I really try hard to, like, I can still pat him on the top of the head and I can squeeze his shoulders and give him a hug and try and offer to read them books, offer again to read them books, because there's just a lot of offering. You're going to hear this list and go, oh, it's a lot of you, like, I'm trying. I feel like it's me going, let's do this. Yeah. And they don't always take the bait. But we force everyone to go for a walk or a bike ride, and they say, we don't want to do that. And then they're fine once they get
without
there.
a smartphone in the stroller, like actually letting them be present in the pace of life.
Yep. Here. I feel like this was a big win. We hadn't taken the kids to Costco for a long time with everything. And then I was able to just take one kid to Costco last week, and that felt like, oh, that was really good. Like, he was so happy to be in the car and chat my ear off the whole time. And we got the $1.65 hot dog and lemonade. And he was like, this is the best day. I'm like, well, that was a win. I spent $1.65. You actually helped me at Costco, and we got to have one-on-one time. Like, it doesn't always have to be this giant, big thing. Playing Legos is a big win for our kids if we play with them, playing a board game with them. And then one that one of our kids is really into is those radish kids. I think we talked about that before, right? When COVID, they were giving those kits away for free.
And they're not cheap.
They're not cheap, but we've talked about this a little bit before, even with the drool tech. Like, replacing drool tech sometimes means that you have to shell out a little bit of cash to make that happen. And especially if it's really got its hooks in your kid. Like, I think, anyway, one option sometimes, like, oh, I don't want to spend $25 on a Radish Kids kit, but that $25 could mean we have a lot of opportunities now to do something in the kitchen that he's able to do pretty independently, but I can be there with him, and it's paying for an opportunity and paying for quality time. So sometimes that's worth it. So I think the pattern obviously is initial resistance. Like, there's the Holy Spirit is prompting me, like, hey, you haven't talked to this child, or you haven't really engaged with this kid. Like, let's reach out. And then the kid is like, I don't want to. Yeah. And then I go, we're still going to do this. Like, we're going to keep doing it. And I ask 1,000 times, and then we do it. And it doesn't always mean it's for 2 hours. It can be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. And like we said before, not every moment is magical and meaningful. But I think we are big Young Life people. We love Young Life and love kind of their idea of, like, you're earning the right to be heard. And even when they're little, or if you have teenage, whatever age your kid, like, putting in the little time and the little bit of work and to get those moments, and to know that you're a safe place, and like that you're available to be. Mom's not always on her phone. Like, if I ask her a question, she's going to stop and pay attention, even if it's something little, like, means, okay, now we've built this pattern of trust that when you ask me a question, I'm going to pay attention to you. So when there is something big, there's that right to be heard. I've earned the right to be there and to hopefully be the person that they talk to.
Right. Or at least will be brought in, and they're not, seeking that out. So I think to kind of tie this in, we started with this idea of how do we pursue our kids and what does that look like? And then we're coming back to, all right, well, first, we're going to assess kind of where is our tech in our just day-to-day rhythms. Is it a constant default go-to, or is it just a potential default go-to? Like, that's going to change the way we deal with it. And then what are we looking to for our hope? I actually didn't address what an idol is. So we'll go with the Tim Keller. Like, Tim Keller says, basically, an idol is anything you let on the throne of your heart other than God. So if God is the great creator of all things, he is our heavenly Father. That's not metaphorical language just to be metaphorical. It's really the best relationship that can be described here of someone who has created us and loves us and is on a different plane than us, right? As the begetter, rather than the begettee. I guess we're not even begotten of God, but we are created by God, and we are and we are deeply loved by God, and he has our best interests in mind. But he's not just buddy God, like he is also our Father, and he is a king. And so with that in mind, he deserves to be in our hearts, right? If he is the source of all goodness, then he is the only thing worth worshiping and praising and seeking. And with that truth then changes our actions, right? Then, okay, well, then everything else that gets on my heart is a lie. And it is somehow going to come back. Even if I put my kid on the throne of my heart, man, I really want to pursue my kid. Well, that's how we get that vicarious living stuff. And now I'm taking joy because I am experiencing this for my kid instead of with my kid, right? So idols are anything that sits on the throne of our heart. And Tim Keller would go on to say that our hearts are idol factories. We constantly are looking for things to fulfill us that have no power to do so, because the longing of our heart is to be known, is to belong, and to be connected to the saving God of the universe. And there's only one way to do that, and that's with Jesus, so that we can be known by God and fully know God. And so that is what we are working towards. We're being made into the likeness of Jesus. We're going to invite our kids along with it, because idols are just distractions from that. They're often good things that have been distorted. Our kids are good things. If they get on the throne of our heart, though, they become a distortion and not good. So we're not trying to just get our kids to be good enough. We're not trying to add them up to our idea of success. We're trying to purposefully pursue them because we were first loved, right? So we love because God first loved us. Yeah. And so that's kind of our thinking on pursuing kids. Our hope this week is that you will see opportunities to just one spot in your week this week, to find one spot where you can say, you know what, I'm going to pursue my kid in this way repeatedly. Not just I'm going to offer once to go do an activity they want, but I'm going to keep asking. I'm going to keep pushing this button to the point where they might even go, man, why are you doing this, right? Like, you might be pushing the wrong button. I don't know. But showing that persistence. And if they push back and say, why are you doing this? Be like, because I love you. Because love means choosing the highest good for the other person. Because I love you, because Christ first loved me. And I want to show that in this repeated pursuit of your heart and of your mind and of your person, right? And if this doesn't work, like, let's do something you want to do. That's great. Or maybe they're just in a spot where they need to be given a voluntold opportunity. Maybe that's where you're at. But I choose that one way this week, and prayerfully do that. And God will continue to reveal to you, like, things about yourself and things about your kids that will allow you to love them well, to pursue their hearts, because it's the great hound of heaven pursuing us, and we get to model that for our kids in this rare little season until they're adults, and then they get to go and be doing this for others, and eventually maybe their own families.
A long, long time.
Many years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So other thoughts to wrap that up, love?
No.
Okay. Well, everybody, I hope this was helpful. Anna did an awesome job in kind of helping coagulate these ideas into one thought. Our prayer and hope is that you feel encouraged from this, that you can think about how you are pursuing your kiddos in this tech world, not with the idea of, man, we need to get them away from tech, but we need to get them to Jesus. And we are not going to do that with convincing arguments or lots of really pretty words or the right lesson plans. We're going to do that by them experiencing this idea, again, Young Life saying that faith in Jesus is caught, not taught. That yes, there is gospel teaching that needs to be accurate, but the best teaching in the world is not going to do anything if they've never met Jesus. It still just stays facts, and they're going to know a lot about him. So we have to meet Jesus, and as we do, we get to bring our kiddos along and bring our neighbors along and bring our church community along, and keep reminding ourselves, like, this is who we are as children of God. This is what it looks like for our kids, for our tech, for our COVID quarantine new normal, and we hope you feel encouraged in that. So thank you all. If this was helpful, would you please rate, review, share it, post it out on your social media, let people know what we are doing at Gospel Tech. We have some changes coming up here, and they're exciting ones, but kind of just I guess not even changes. We have a refocusing that will be occurring. We'll announce it in the next few weeks, along with the long-awaited video and workshop curriculum. So there's going to be an online workshop along with a workbook. It is making progress. I'm on the final video of edits right now before we send that over to Mr. Jeff Marsh. Thanks, Jeff Marsh. Doing an amazing job on that stuff. Jeff Marsh Studios is incredible. And we're very thankful for him and the work there. So we have some cool stuff coming up. It's going to take your continued support. If you have any questions, email nathan@flintandire.org, anna@flintandire.org, DM at Sparking Purpose through Facebook or at Flint and Iron. I think that's everything. Anything I forgot?
I think that was all of it.
All of the information and more than you ever asked for. So with that,
see you later.
Signing off. Thank you guys. Looking forward to continuing this conversation in the future.